I'm aware that so far I haven't shown you the more hands-on Vectorworks stuff, but honestly, setup is everything. If you don't set up a project correctly from the start, it will create a lot of headaches for you later. And workflow is everything. Workflow is everything, really. Stay on track of it by subscribing, absolutely liking it, spread the word. Okay. Now we're going to look into how to reference your files when you're starting a project off my template from scratch. Speaking of which, before we do anything, we need a SketchUp model. Now, I'm not going to use my own model for this video because that would be an infringement of real clients' designs. Instead, I'm going to just go into 3D Warehouse from SketchUp and download Sergey Lutak's house model, and it's looking nice. I gotta give him real credit for that. Looks really nice and whimsical with a little bit of Corbusier and touch. I've just downloaded this house model. It's only 11 megabytes, which is remarkably small. But let's assume that that's the house that I've happily designed and I want to start documenting professionally for a client. And notice that the title I've copied has condoc_joinery. The reason I prefer to keep joinery separate from the main model is just because as you progress, especially for larger builds, the model sizes become large and that slows down a typical computer's performance. Just about any MacBook. If you're Windows, you probably won't run into too many problems, but I find Mac, unfortunately, isn't spec'd for anything over 200 megabytes per file. Okay, so this isn't for the joinery, this is just the house. I will give it that name. What's going on here? So, yep, it's got the right date. Contact model SketchUp. I'm going to drag that in here. This is superseded. That just comes with the template. And notice that we have all of these references going on here. That's because what I need to do is supersede them. I'm going to start with a new blank file. Doesn't need any template imported into it. I'm going to go to File, Import SketchUp. And look at, has it? Nope. Thought it sent me straight to where I wanted to go, but it didn't. Then I'm going to select the model file, press open. Now, it's going to give you a couple of options. I've never played around with architectural objects. I think the purpose of that is it will convert any planes into certain dimensions, but that's not what we want because this model's already been modeled exactly how we want it to be modeled. Then you have the choice to customize things and bring them in by so-and-so, but I honestly find it's not worth the time, especially the way that this process is set up. It's not necessary. When it comes to importing materials, I tend to tick that off when I'm in setup stage. It's only something you want to bring in later when you are ready to start showing final products to the client or builders and so. Now, this one here is a little bit divisive because you almost get the same end result. If you choose groups of 3D polygons, apparently it's trying to de-triangularize all the shapes and meshes that SketchUp will produce. I find Vectorworks Mesh Object sometimes does produce strange objects. It just will bring things in quicker. I'm not quite sure how it all works, but I know that this is less likely to fail me in terms of how things view. So I tend to tick that. And we'll see how fast it takes to bring in a 10 megabyte file. Wow, look at that. Almost instantaneous. Okay, so we have our 10 megabyte file. If I pan around just to see if we have any model conflicts, it's looking pretty healthy to me. That's nice. And we don't have to get caught up about all these lines that are showing because as we start modeling things later, they will present differently. You have control over how a viewport will show and present lines, just like in SketchUp actually. This is looking nice and healthy. I'm going to save it as condoc model reference, and we'll give it a project number 2605 because it's my 5th project this year. How cool. And the date is, hello. Well, technically I could just click that, couldn't I? It saves me the effort. Why do I have 2 underscores? Okay, and save it. Now I want to create layers that categorize a few basic elements which will be useful for documentation later. The number one are doors and windows. And I have the setting on layer option, gray snap others. So as I move some things into other layers, I will know that they've been moved. Now, ideally, if I were modeling in SketchUp, I would group things properly. That means I can select it, any doors, and move it to the layer doors and windows, and then it will gray them out. So everything's not lost, it's just where I want them to be. And if I were modeling in SketchUp, I would be sure to class things or group them all together just to make this process a little bit more handy. So I'm going to select on my windows and doors and keep moving them over to the doors and windows layer. What's going on here? Okay. Now this setup process, depending on your project, might be a little bit tedious, especially if you find you need to update it later. But once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. You see, it's not so bad after all. Unfortunately, when you import a SketchUp model, it's not going to give you the same tags or the entity info. That's because when it imports, it just brings everything in as a class. So you get all the classes from the model. That's it. Then you have to recategorize, unfortunately. And then the next thing I'd want to do for a layer, just for setup stage, would be the digital terrain model or the landscape. Now, what I would do is, to make life easy for myself, because I can see that they're mostly uniform but ungrouped, I'm going to see if I can drag across and be very selective. That looks to have mostly clipped what I want. For now, it's good enough. Again, what I would do is in SketchUp, group it to make that process less chancy. And another thing that I definitely need to recommend is when you're in SketchUp, whatever you last save, so whatever's visible at the point of saving in your model, is what will be imported into SketchUp. If you have any hidden classes or layers, they won't be brought into SketchUp. Therefore, I would recommend setting up a scene in SketchUp before bringing it in. That way you can just press a button and everything you want to be on will be on. Okay, so we have in our model folder the original SketchUp, and then we also have now the condoc model reference. This is rendered superfluous, don't need it, or should I say superseded. And we can get to finally bringing something in. I'm going to show you just how it works. For this setup, we have a lot of abbreviations, which are worthwhile getting familiar with. VP stands for viewport, and then reference is when you're viewporting a model within the Vectorworks file. So right now it's all referencing something, even if they're incorrect. I can see that it all has project date. That means it is not referenced to the correct file yet. So what I want to do is press on condoc model reference, because that's what I know I want to do. I like to do this setting just because it doesn't overwork the computer. It's always referencing directly. I've located the file that I want to reference in. Here it is, condoc model, you see, and open, then okay. Let's start with the viewport model reference layer. You can see that it hasn't shown anything yet, even though we are correctly referenced. That is because it's referring to the placeholders layers. What we need to do is go back into it and activate the layers we want. And if it's still not showing certain aspects, it might mean that some classes are off. Again, it's because it's just referring to a few things. And here you have control. You can leave things on and off to the viewport. Where I work, we like to have a non-plot or always do not show kind of class or tag. So you can import that and then hide it if that's what you like. So you can see here we have layer control. What I'm going to do now that we have this viewport set up is Command C, and then I'm going to go to my viewport doors and window, copy paste in place. I have my own shortcut for that. Yeah, I'll show you how to do that if you don't. You go to help, then you type copy, or maybe paste. Paste in place. But I have my own shortcut, as I said. This is for doors and windows. That means we're going to turn that off. Then we're going to turn this on. Now we have our doors and windows isolated. I gather this was not modeled with any specialty plugins because everything's behaving. Some unique plugins might import their own unique origin points, and that's where you might find windows rotated 90 degrees or on their backside. There are two ways you can go about it. In your copy SketchUp model, you explode everything before exporting. If you want to do it in the Vectorworks process, all you have to do is open up the reference file, select everything, and do Command K. Or you go to the help and type in convert to group objects. Convert to group options. You select this second option here, press OK, and that will remove any internal origin points that might destroy the model. Then I'm going to save. I'll go back to this and go to my references panel, then update the reference. And when it's red, it means it's out of date. And Vectorworks is always keeping a watchful eye on this sort of stuff, which is very good. Okay, now we have our doors and windows. I know I have a viewport DTM. I'll copy paste, bring in layers, and then make sure only DTM is activated. What I'm noticing about this model is that he has modeled to a reduced level of 0. So this model is imported exactly where it's been modeled in SketchUp. And something I highly recommend is don't move it in SketchUp. Keep that consistent wherever you start. Just make sure it's as close to the origin point 0, 0 as possible. And make sure that we're not accidentally dragging the model somewhere else. So then later you come back to find, oops, things aren't matching or aligning anymore. A way to avoid that accident happening is by locking the group or the viewport model. The template's viewport layers are highly suggestive of what should be separated. We would also have our own reference file for the survey. Absolutely. I would always like to do my viewport neighbors in relation to the building, because you'll need that for some things. Then we usually would model an existing house, even if we're demolishing, or especially if we're integrating. Then the viewport joinery. I may as well show you how I'd go about doing that as well. Now I have two choices. I can model them separately in SketchUp, or I can separate them in Vectorworks. Because I've already gone through the trouble of importing, let's assume that this was a 200 megabyte model. I can do this more fast if I just do it with the information I already have. I'll show you what I mean by that. So I will go into here. I know that that's a joinery unit. That looks like furniture. I'll keep that here for now. Well, it's not relevant to this project. I will actually delete it, because I'm not using this for specialty renders of interiors. That's honestly, SketchUp is arguably better at that. But this is the information I'd like. I'm going to Control X. What do you call that? That's cutting. Yep. I'm going to cut this. For me, that's Command or Windows X. And I'm going to open a new file. And then I will use that magical paste and place button. That should go exactly where it was before. Nice kitchen. Now I'm going to save this. Except I know that we want to throw a joinery in front of condoc. And save. There we have our joinery. I'll save this again because we need to update it. That way we don't have a clash. What I will do real quick, I'll just turn off that. Yep. And then when we update, we'll see that that little kitchen reference there is removed. Something I'll show you also, if you're not familiar with the power of Vectorworks, is use my clip cube, and I will push it back into the building so I can see what's going on. Like a little dollhouse. How cute. Then I'm going to edit this condoc joinery reference and put it to the correct file. Okay. Now, when that comes in, nothing will happen. That's because it doesn't quite know what to do yet. Because the viewport hasn't been set up, I have to do it manually, which is good because you might be asking, how did he do that before in the first place? What you want to do is go to View, Create Viewport, and then Create on Layer. We want to take that to the viewport joinery. Select my source as an external document and select joinery model. I'll press OK. I'll make sure the layers that I want are on, as well as the classes. Everything looks good. I'll press OK. And see, it drops exactly where we want it to drop. And that's because everything is in relation to SketchUp's origin point, in relation to 0, 0. So always have elevation set to 0. Always make sure that every viewport layer is set to elevation 0. That's because their elevation is already baked into SketchUp. So you'll need to do it once in SketchUp, and then the rest follows from the 3D model viewports. You can take these to the extreme where you start, if you have sliding screens, you probably would want to keep those separate from the rest of the model. And that's just because when you eventually viewport or live viewport these models, you don't want to show the entire model at the same time. And it also will slow down the rendering speed if you have too many lines just about everywhere in the way. So this is a really good start to a model. I congratulate the modeler. Recalling back to a previous video, we have the model folder and the sheet folder. All the references that we were working on just now are in the model because they're based on the SketchUp model. That's 3D information. What I want to do is copy that title, go to sheet, because in sheet, we've been working on the conversion of that SketchUp information into Vectorworks. And I need to give it a proper name. We give it the project, the date, and condoc. It's not a model, it's only condoc. And let's say we want to make a backup of this. I'm going to copy it and go into backup and then paste that into the backups folder. That way, let's say I want to start working in it tomorrow. I give it a new date. That's it. That's how to do references for this template system. So far, I haven't uploaded many videos, but we're going to get there, and I'll see you soon.